In this video, we start to look at these theories about the source of competitive advantage. If you remember, in the previous video, we explored how different academics and researchers had different assumptions about where competitive advantage came from. Some focus on the activities of the firm, others on to the resources possessed by the firm. Some see competitive advantage as being sustainable across time, others see the environment as being more dynamic, and the source of advantage having to change over time. Now, in this video, we're going to focus in on the views of Michael Porter. So here on this diagram, we're looking at the top right-hand corner. The idea that competitive advantage comes because the firm has a complex system of activities that are aligned to a position chosen in the marketplace. This view is often called strategy as choice. Now, Porter's perspective is that resources aren't a source of competitive advantage. So the things the firm has do not create a difference. They're available in the marketplace and the value is built into the cost of acquiring it or developing it. So in total, no benefit is gained from the resources. For Porter, the source of competitive advantage is activities. It's the things that a person or a group or the organisation does with those resources. So it's what you do with the resources and the way you do it that's important, not having the resource itself. But also, Porter is coming from an outside-in perspective. So he is saying that you need to understand the external marketplace, the external environment, and then choose a position in that marketplace that will give you advantage. So an outside-in view of strategy. Now in that, he says that there are two parts of strategy that are essential. Firstly, the firm has to understand its industry structure. Again, you remember we looked at the external environment, about ways in which you can look at that industry structure and how broader trends and issues in the macro environment would act through that industry structure to impact on the firm. So yes, for Porter, very much you need to have a deep understanding of that industry structure. But that is not enough. You also have to choose your position in that industry. So choose a defensible position, choose a way in which you compete, and so have competitive advantage through that choice. Now here Porter is emphasizing the need for firms to be different. What he's saying is that if firms were all the same in industry, then no firm would have a competitive advantage. He goes even further. He says that strategy rests on creating a unique and valuable position, which means performing activities different than rivals do. And in that, fundamentally, firms have to make a choice if they're going to have competitive advantage. Let's listen to Michael Porter making this very point.
So the idea that there's one way to compete in any business is just simply not true. There's often many ways to compete. There's many different ways of delivering value for the customers you choose to serve. And the job of the strategist is to figure out how you're going to do that better and uniquely well. The essence of strategy is not about being the best, it's about how are we unique? How can we deliver some unique value, and we'll talk about value a little bit later, to the customers that we in our organization are trying to serve. And one of the truisms of competition and strategy is you can't meet the needs of every customer. You can't do that. It's impossible. If you try to meet everybody's needs, the chances are you'll not be very good at meeting anybody's needs. And that's a very powerful idea and strategy. Strategy is essentially about competing to be unique.
So to be unique, you have to make a choice. You can't be two things at the same time. Now, fundamental to the purpose of positioning is getting superior performance. And here, there are effectively two ways of doing that. You can either look to gain higher prices by offering something better for customers, which they're willing to pay more for, or you're able to operate giving good enough products or services, but doing it very efficiently. So you have inherently greater efficiency in your firm. This again isn't to Porter making this point.
The first idea is that the fundamental purpose of positioning is to get superior performance. We're not positioning for its own sake. We're positioning because we want to do better economically or in delivering value for the customer, if we're not in a business, than our rivals. Okay? And in order to do better, in order to be more profitable, in order to deliver higher economic value, we only really have two ways of doing that. One is we've got to be able to command a higher price. If we can command a premium price for our product or our service, and we can keep our cost in control, we will be more profitable. That's one route to superior profitability, which again ultimately is what strategy is all about. The other way we can be more profitable is we can have lower cost because we're inherently more efficient at doing the things that are necessary in the business. And if we can have an acceptable product and we can deliver that acceptable product at a lower cost, again, we will be more profitable. These are the two paths to superior profitability: a higher price or a lower relative cost. Once in a while, we can do both, but it turns out to be really hard. Because the things that it requires to get superior value and a premium price are often somewhat inconsistent with the things that you want to do to actually minimize the cost. So usually we have to make a choice. We have to decide, what are we trying to be? Are we trying to be what I call a differentiator? Unique value, unique performance, unique features, unique services, higher price? Or are we trying to be a kind of a cost leader? Good product, good enough quality, good enough features, really efficient, really cost-effective price, maybe even a discount. But we're so efficient that we can make money even if we give a discount.
So, choosing between being differentiated and so gaining higher prices, or be inherently lower cost. But the things you need to do for each are very different. If you're looking to be the low-cost leader, then you're looking at how you gain economies of scale. How are you improving efficiency throughout all parts of your business? How are you forcing down the input costs, cost of materials coming into the firm, the cost of labour? And your focus of innovation development is on to processes. It's looking at how you can be more efficient. So innovating to gain more efficiency. That's a very different set of focuses in terms of what you're doing in the firm and the activities you're doing than if you had chosen to be a differentiator. Here, you're focusing on how you can increase the utility of your products and services, building in more quality, perhaps building more image around your brand, so it's appealing more closely to customers. It's more closely fitting their needs. And because it's fitting their needs more closely, they are willing to pay more for it. So those differences are meaningful to those customers, such that they are willing to pay that extra money. And here, of course, the focus is going to be on the customer and understanding those customers in depth. And innovation is on matching those customers' needs through features in products, new services, etc. As Porter made clear in that video we just saw, it is very rare that you can try to be both low cost and differentiated. The activities are so different. So you have to make a very clear strategic choice as a management team about which direction you're going in. Let's just delve into that a little bit more deeply so we really understand the driver of this. You start with an industry where there are a set of players, and to start with, they're all competing in the same way. As one starts to increase its quality, perhaps a bit, it may find that it can attract some customers which value that quality, while others perhaps have focused on improving efficiency to a degree. Well, that's going to attract customers who are really driven by price. Those who are still trying to do both will see they're losing those customers. If, over time, those firms who've focused on better quality continue that journey, that products or services are going to appeal to more and more customers. And equally, those companies that go on focusing on efficiency are going to get better and better at being efficient, and so can bring their price down lower and still make a profit. Customers continue to make choices, and increasingly find they'll be turning to either the lowest price or to the better quality. And so you'll see the industry dividing into strategic groups. Firms that have not made a focus will end up what Porter describes as stuck in the middle. They have neither the quality that will appeal to some customers nor the low price that will appeal to others, and they see their customer base shrinking over time. Porter says that in a competitive environment, you have to choose and then focus those activities of the firm and its resource into excelling either in that differentiated space or at being low cost. You can't do both. You must make a choice, but just making that choice is not enough. You have to change the organization to align with that choice in order to gain advantage. Unless you tangibly change the organization, everyone can do the same thing. So for Porter, all competitive advantage stems from how you configure activities in your value chain. And so configure those activities to match that choice of position that you have made. Here Porter offers a very well-known tool, the value chain. Now the value chain is simply a pigeonhole system. It's to get you to think about the whole organisation and not forget about parts, to get that holistic view. This is important because often you'll find in businesses, managers will focus very narrowly onto their own part of that firm. So if you're an expert in operations, then typically you will focus and look for solutions just within the operations area. If you're in marketing, you're an expert at advertising or promotion, then again, as issues occur, you will tend to look for marketing solutions to those issues. Same is true in HR or finance. The tendency of managers is to focus where their day job is. So what the value chain is trying to do is getting you to look widely at the whole business to make sure you are thinking about every part. And in the value chain, Porter divides up the activities of the firm into two parts. The first part, which he calls the primary activity, which runs along the bottom of the value chain, is the flow of production. So for a manufacturing business, raw materials or components will arrive at the plant, and the activity for receiving those inputs he calls inbound logistics. So maybe it is the unloading of lorries coming in, the cataloguing and storing of them. The next box in that primary activity run is operations. This is where those inputs are transformed into the final product. Then those finished items then flow out of the factory off to distributors, to retailers, to whatever. And Porter uses the term therefore of outbound logistics for those activities. He then brings in a box for marketing in sales. Now the position of this very much reflects the norms when Porter was developing this model in the 1970s, at which point often you'd find products being manufactured for stock and then that stock being marketed and sold. These days you'll probably find that marketing is spread right across the value chain, but that's okay, because remember, this model is to make you remember to think about these things. So where it's positioned doesn't matter too much. And then the final box on that primary activity run is after sales service. So what happens after the customer has received the product? What are the maintenance inputs? What are the spare parts you're providing? These after sales services. Now for a service business, it is useful to think about it being the customers that flow through those primary activities. So if you're an airline company, then the customers, the passengers, arrive at the airport, are loaded onto the plane. See that as inbound logistics. Those passengers are then transformed from being in point A to being in point B. That's the operations part, the in-flight activities. The passengers then get off the plane and leave the airport, outbound logistics. Marketing sales, that, as in most services, is taking place before they've received the service. And then after sales service, what are those activities the airline company might be doing after those passengers have completed their flight? Maybe car rental arrangements, maybe hotels, so those extra add-ons. Turning to the secondary activities. Now these are activities that support the production process. So procurement, so one of those activities about negotiating and getting the inputs that the firm needs, whether that is in terms of component parts, raw materials, or in terms of buying in plant and machinery. For an airline company, buying in the airplanes themselves, or the food that is being served on the airplane. Going up, the next box is technology development. And here we need to think in the widest sense about technology. So not just about IT, but could be the way in which the service is designed or being developed. The new parts of the manufacturing process that have been brought in. So those developments of the production process. Next box up, human resource management. All those activities that are going on with staff. The hiring, the training, the reward systems, etc. And then right at the top, a catch-all box of firm infrastructure. So here would be the activities of the senior management team, of finance, of securing premises for the firm, interaction with shareholders, those things that allow the firm to operate as a commercial entity. Now if you're in a firm, what you do with the value chain is that you'd drill down through each of those areas, looking at what is happening. So perhaps in the operations area, you drill down into subsections of that operations process and then further subsections of that. So you're understanding the activities, important, it is the activities that are going on each area. Now what that allows you to do is to think about alignment to the choice you've made about strategic positioning. So you can look, if we've chosen to be a low-cost operator, low-cost airline company, we can see how choices have been made about activities that align with being low cost. Brings efficiency into each area of the value chain. So how you're loading the plane more quickly with passengers and consumables, how you're using one type of airplane to get discounts from suppliers, how you're training staff to enhance that operational turnover, etc. So you think about how alignment is happening in every part of that value chain. Now this thinking of Porter about choice between differentiation and cost leader and the need to align the value chain developed in the 1970s and early 1980s and was adopted by many firms. However, criticism started to rise. That need for choice was challenged by other academics suggesting that firms could be both differentiated and low cost at the same time, could be the best cost provider. Also, the performance of US firms wasn't spectacular as a result of adopting this thinking through the 1980s and 1990s. So challenges being raised to Porter. Now, Porter, though, responds to those challenges. Firstly, with a criticism about the way in which strategy has been adopted since he published his work. He said in many companies, leadership has degenerated into orchestrating operational improvements and making deals. So the focus wasn't on strategy. By not making a choice, firms were just focusing on operational effectiveness. And for him, operational effectiveness is not strategy. Let's hear Porter himself making this point.
What's interesting is that just being operationally effective, just assimilating best practices, just kind of rapidly adopting the latest good ideas, usually doesn't allow you to get a competitive advantage. Maybe for an instant. But if it's a best practice, what's going to happen? Everybody else is going to do it. And of course, the vendors are going to be frothing at the mouth to spread this best practice to every single customer, including your competitors. So yes, we've got to work really hard at driving best practice and driving operational improvement, and some of your projects and some of your programs are just about this. And in that case, your path is pretty clear, and in a sense, what you've got to understand is you have a pretty fixed target. And you've got to think of it externally in terms of what best practice is of companies like yours. But best practice improvement is not strategy. Strategy is something different than that. Strategy is not about doing the same things better or getting, more fast adoption of best practice. Strategy is actually about choosing to do things differently. Strategy is about the things that aren't best practice. Strategy is about the things over which you must choose. And what you want to choose is how you're going to distinguish yourself and where your advantage is going to come from. It's not going to come from best practice improvement because people are going to follow you if you happen to get in the lead. It's going to come from choices you make about how to be unique, about what position you want to occupy in your business relative to your competitors. And that's where ultimately sustainable advantage comes from.
So what he's saying that if firms just focus on operational effectiveness, so looking to the same activities, so using best practice, using benchmarking, using outsourcing, getting consultants to come in and help develop best practice, will mean that over time firms become increasingly similar. You get strategic convergence. And if all firms are the same, the only differential for customers is going to be price. And therefore you would expect profits to erode. So Porter looks to update his thinking. And this is something he has been doing since a famous article in 1996 called What is Strategy, and in presentations he's been giving through the 2000s and 2010s. And that enhanced view, Porter Mark II if you like, is what we'll explore in the next video.